Gladly.
Super social mode activated. We just filmed like 15 minutes of a podcast, and I'm worried that the music was blaring loud behind us. So
copyrighted.
I'm making, that's the thing, is like you post your podcast to Spotify and Apple Music, so I don't want to.
Gotta be careful.
If you get copyrighted there, it's like they'll probably just take your podcast off. I don't know how it works.
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
Welcome back to Respectfully Inspired with Aussie Films. I like to start off every podcast with my why, which is that I want to inspire you to invest in soul wealth. So not the classic wealth, which is building up your money, possessions, or achievements, but soul wealth, which is pouring into your relationships and creating memories. And I have one of the best examples of soul wealth here. His name's Kyle Goesoff, that's his handle, and he quit his job to travel the United States by car. He's kind of like a van lifer, but in his car. And he has a meal with someone in every single state, a stranger generally. Could you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how many meals you've had with people and just living out of your car?
Yeah, I think, so the last time I officially counted was 18 states. I think I'm up to around like 20 now, so less than half actually. And then at that time, I had ate with 41 people, so I generally do multiple people in each state, just because one person's probably not like to like encapsulate like the entire culture of a state. But now it's probably up to like 45 people.
One's also just, that would be not worth it. Go to a state for one person.
Yeah, I mean, if I really wanted to capitalize on momentum and do the content the most effective way, it like would still be the short form, but I would have done probably I probably would have done it in like 50 days, went to each state every single day, collaborated with somebody, did higher collaborations. Not like a lot of people are just regular people or just, strangers or something like that. But if I was smarter about it, it probably would have been like a collaboration with like somebody known in every single state or a food like that. So that would have been the smarter way to do it, and it probably would have taken off a little bit more.
That's interesting that you say that, though, because I always have this vision, because my whole thing is soul wealth.
Yeah.
And one of the things I mentioned for regular wealth is achievements. And I don't want to just interview people because they've achieved something.
Yeah.
And a lot of podcasts hold themselves accountable to I need a bigger guest and I need a bigger, and that's the whole thing I'm trying to push with this podcast, is that it's not about the next thing or the bigger thing. And so is that kind of part of your motivation as to why you haven't gone for this pitch perfect social media plan and just kind of went with the flow and regular strangers and everyday people?
Yeah, I mean, monetarily wise, that probably would have been the smarter thing to do, but certainly. A lot of the journey was also kind of just meant for me, not as much of just for the content too.
Yeah. And
so I was trying to explore a lot of things, on my I was telling you earlier, I really wanted to explore different states and different cities and see, because I didn't really like where I grew up, my hometown in Kansas. I knew that wasn't where I wanted to live forever, so I wanted to find a place where I would want to have as a home base. And doing that, I wasn't going to get that experience by being in a place for a day and doing one video. And so I've tried to take my time at the places that I went to, actually get to know people who are there. And so in multiple states, I have friend groups that are in multiple states now. And I wouldn't have gotten out if I would have done it.
Especially too, if you collab with someone who's bigger than you in every state, it's almost, you could hit it off really well and you could make a real friendship, but it's almost
exactly.
It's transactional to the point where it's maybe you collab with someone, but the next time you're back in that state, they're not going to be there. Whereas you have real, genuine friends. They're probably watching your videos. They're probably rooting for you. And you go back there and they're still there. You brought up this idea of seeing every city. You told it to me earlier as city dating.
Yeah.
and I find it so interesting because a lot of people move. They get a job offer, they move, or they go to college and they move, and all they've done is visit the city once or something.
Maybe, yeah.
And you're not ready to move. I mean, you've been on the road for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Can you describe this concept of city dating?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the vibe and all the things that cities have to offer. Every place is so different. Every single state here is like the countries that are in Europe. Every place has its own culture. It's so different. And they all have different things to offer. And so I've just kind of tried to keep myself open and be like, okay, what does something have to offer? What are those things that maybe are unexpected that I would like? And so I've just kind of come to find what I would want most in a city and in a culture and the people that are there. And so I'm just trying to find like the right mix that is in each place. And so I've gotten, because I've spent weeks or maybe a month at a place, I feel like I've actually gotten to kind of feel and experience what it's like to live in that place and if it would fit.
And so do you have any leading options?
I have liked San Diego a lot so far. I love New York City, but way too expensive. But that type, like, I didn't know if I would like a city because I tend to like a lot of nature stuff.
Yeah.
I've never been in a big city from Kansas,
Yeah.
not been in a big city, but I absolutely loved it as far as being able to, everything was very walkable. I could take the train everywhere. There was so much diversity in food and culture and things to do. There's something for everybody there.
Yeah.
There's so many niches. Like you can find your exact group of people who are like, oh, I didn't know somebody else existed like me. And there's like so many people like that there in New York. So I think that there's a magic to that as well. But then there's been other times where I've been in like a very, very small town in North Carolina where it's just very peaceful and beautiful.
Yeah.
And like didn't think that I would like something like that at all either. So there's all kinds of things. And then a lot of friends that I've talked to that I've made that are in this type of field have considered Austin.
Dude, Austin's blowing up.
I know.
Creators are hubbing there.
Danny Miranda just moved there, so there's a lot of people that are going there, and I've loved Austin every time I went. It is something
I love it too. I just went.
It was kind of close by for Kansas, and I've wanted to live there for years, actually. I just never actually went out and did it, but a lot of people go there, like, after college, so it's very, those type of people. The cost of living there is not crazy like it is in New York, so you can have just, one normal job and have money and time for extracurricular activities, and it's got a little bit of nature, music, and food is crazy out there. So, like, it has a lot of the aspects, and if all those creative friends were there, that would be awesome.
Interesting enough, Austin is the podcast capital of the world. Yeah. Or I don't know the world, but of America, so probably the world.
Yeah.
Earlier we talked about this idea is like people on Instagram, they post their highlights. You post like the best moments when you have these crazy dinner experiences and times with strangers. But I know behind the scenes, you must have spent a lot of time in your car alone, driving alone. And I want to ask you, is van life lonely?
It has aspects where it can be lonely. When I first started, it was definitely, there was times when it was lonely and I had to adjust to that. Because I'm pretty lucky because I do content, so I do get people that message me and I do get to meet up with a lot of people, so I think that's made it less lonely for me.
Yeah.
But as far as posting highlights too, I do try and post a lot of things that aren't highlights.
Yeah.
I try to be pretty authentic with my stuff, and I feel like a lot of things that I've posted that are more authentic like that have done some of the best. Like the best video that I have on YouTube is like me just figuring out that my front seat could fold down, and so I was like cramped in this like back seat for the longest time, and I was just like screaming in the car. And so I think sharing that moment, like that made the video, and
that's really funny.
And so I try and share stuff like that where it's like less than ideal things, or getting trapped in the snowstorm in Utah and like, the crazy things that you have to deal with. So I mean, it always adds to part of the story. Like, even though those things can be bad, I think that it does make it more entertaining. But
we should give some context on that. So this guy's traveled to some of the most beautiful places. He's seen glaciers. He's seen New York City, all of America, South America, Europe. He's seen everywhere. And his most viral video is when he found out that his car front seat could fold down. Yeah. Was that from a comment?
Yeah.
A comment told you. The comment was like,
somebody
hey,
told me that,
your car front seat can fold down. And you're like, what?
Yeah, I had no idea.
That's so funny.
No, and then, I always get roasted because everybody's like, how do you not know that? But not every car does that. No car I've ever had before.
I've never heard of a car front seat.
Tanner has the same car as me, but a year different, and his doesn't do that.
Oh,
so
damn.
It's very like a very specific thing, and so I mean, I never tried it or anything.
How many months before you figured that out?
Oh, it was a whole year.
You were on the road a year before you figured that out.
And then now I can like lay out. And
that's funny.
Extend my legs, which is I
know we kind of just talked about this, and then I scrapped that pod, but I do want to bring it up again. The idea of like you go to some of the most beautiful places in the world and glaciers, but a lot of moments like are alone. Do you think success has to be shared with someone? Like, are you ever at a beautiful place and you kind of just wish that someone could be there with you?
Oh yeah, all the time. Pretty much all the time. I mean, there's moments that like is nice to share, like for yourself or like for a particular accomplishment or something. But I think a lot of it, like, obviously comes back to like Into the Wild's like a big movie. I think for a lot of us that travel, and at the end, you know, happiness is only real when shared. And I think that's something that's been really true for me, just because, especially in the start when I was going through the Pacific Northwest alone, I would be, you know, on these crazy cliffs like overlooking the ocean, and it's just me. And it's a really, really weird feeling. So I think even Anthony Bourdain has a quote, like, is it better to be alone, like, in a place that's, like, shitty, or in, like, the most beautiful place in the world? And, like, sometimes it's really weird to be, like, alone in the most beautiful place.
Like, I feel like the first couple times that happens, it's probably, like, a liberating, kind of exciting feeling. But I know that if I were personally city dating, like you are, like finding a place where I want to live, I know that my top priority would be the quality of people.
Yeah.
And there's outliers in every place, but you know, like stereotypes. I don't want to know if stereotypes is the right words, but it's a real thing. Like, Southern hospitality is real, and like people friendliness of different countries and different places. Like, I don't know if saying quality of people is messed up, but
No, I mean, some places aren't as, like, welcoming or like that was like, and places surprise you. Like, I was just in Sedona, and I thought that place, like, I thought this place is going to be, like, up at the top for me, like maybe a place that I'd want to move. It's beautiful. There's supposed to be a lot of just, like, open-minded, like, spiritual things here. And I don't know, just seemed like a very interesting place. And we went there, and like the hardest time that I've had trying to car camp anywhere, and people were pretty rude, pretty passive aggressive. It seemed like a lot of fake, like, spiritual crystal things, like such a letdown. And then, but I've been to, like, random small towns in West Texas or just in Texas in general, where you think, oh, people are going to be very, you know, closed-minded and, like, not welcoming or accepting, or, like, you know, they have a version of, like, what's okay or acceptable for them, and, like, completely didn't experience that at all. Completely experienced the opposite. Like, the friends that I had there were all, like, people that are gay or LGBT, and the community loved them. Like, they were so accepted. They had such a great life there, and you could see that, like, they were so welcoming and accepting for me to just come in and be a part of their friend group, and, like, everybody that they were with was all like that. And this was Texas, not a place that I had expected to find
you'd expect Texas to be, like, against that.
No, and it completely wasn't. And it was, like, the most southern hospitality that I had felt somewhere, and, like, some of the most welcoming that I've felt anywhere in the world was there.
That's interesting.
And that was, once again, like, just something that was super unexpected.
Back on the topic of sharing success alone, I wanted to share this story with you guys. Is that, like, I was in college, and I used to make vlogs with my college dorm buddies, and it was really fun and fulfilling to me. And I left college because I knew that, like, for the grades and the degree, I wasn't meant to be there. I knew school wasn't for me, and that I was going to do creative work, and that whatever I did would not require a degree. And so I left, thinking that when I left college, I would double down on content, I would make more videos, I would have more time. And it was true, I had more time, but all the videos I was making were now alone, because all my friends stayed in college and I left college. And I realized that creating wasn't fun for me if I wasn't doing it with someone else. So a big reason I switched to this podcast is because I get to sit down with people, I get to have a conversation, I get to meet new people, and that's just so much more fulfilling to me than, like, trying to grind it out and be successful, like, on my own. So I agree. I think success is better shared with people, but I think you had brought up a point that you thought it is person by person. That, like, some people who are maybe more introverted.
Yeah, some people, I mean, just as far as, like, they can enjoy a lot of things alone. Like, Rachel from camp, like, she goes out and she has her dog, so, I mean, she's not completely alone. Like, she has some companionship in that. but like she's, you know, off grid in these crazy places, you know, a lot of times alone. And she seems to absolutely love it, which, you know, is great for probably somebody who's introverted. For me, like, I definitely, you know, not super crazy, rambunctious, extroverted, but definitely get energy from people like that. But I mean, even with, I think success is just easier to share when you're doing something with other people and it's collaborative. And I think that's a big thing that's come out of like Creator Camp too. All of us are doing better than ever. And I think a lot of that is like we keep each other inspired, but we always help each other so much with things like, oh, hey, I'm, you know, struggling with this thing, or I need somebody for this, or I need to be introduced to that. And like everybody, I feel like has just helped build each other up in that. And it's all collaborative. Like nobody's competing with each other. Everybody's just trying to, I don't know. It's just like all growing together. And I don't think I've had as much growth or success without.
We should fill them in on what Creator Camp is. Creator Camp is a company owned by our friends who are creators, where they bring everyone to like a cabin in the woods. They bring all these creators, TikTokers, musicians, YouTubers, and you get to stay for a weekend and meet all these other creators. And a lot of people like us, like it's hard to relate to others because it's like what we do is not like what a lot of people do. And now I don't know if you've gotten to this point where I'm so deep in this world where it almost feels the other way around, where it's like all my friends do this now. But it is it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I've had it in the sense where like it can make me feel like an imposter, where it's like all my friends are so successful and I haven't reached the level they've gotten to. But it can also, in a way, but it pushes you, because it's like you are a product of the people you surround yourself with. And it's like every day you go on Instagram and someone's doing something exciting, someone's doing this adventure and posting this video, and it's like, damn, like I need to keep up. And it's much like how they say like moving to LA is, but without like the toxicity of LA, which is like, it's like a game. Everyone's trying to...
There's a difference between like competitiveness and trying to do better so somebody else isn't doing as good, and then there's another thing where somebody inspires you to up your game. And sometimes that creates the best work. Like I know there's situations where I think it was, I can't remember the specific albums, but it was like older musicians, and basically like they heard one album, they're like, man, if I just make something like that one day, like my life would be complete. So because they got inspired by that, they made something great. And then that person who had inspired that album heard that and was like, man, I want to make something as well. So it was just like this thing that kept going. And it wasn't like this competitiveness of like, I want to make something better than you, or I need to be better. It was like, and opened up my world to these things, and so I want to do that. And so it just keeps building.
I mean, I grew up with 3 older brothers. I grew up very competitive. Because it's like my oldest brother is like 10 years older than me. We would play basketball growing up, and he's like 6'2", and I'm like 5'9", and he would, 10 years older, 6'2", 5'9", would not let me score a single point. I was like a 10-year-old, and he'd be blocking the shit out of all my shots and stuff. And so I grew up very, very competitive, and I feel like I've kept it in the right ways. Like I'll see people at camp, I'll see them put out videos, and I'm always rooting for their success. But it still makes me feel like, all right, I got to go do my thing now.
No, and I've definitely always been a competitive person too. I think there's a lot of like, I don't know, because I always was interested in the creative stuff, and that made me different in Kansas. So I think there always was that overcompensation value where I felt like I had things to prove. But I think I've always been competitive since I was a kid too, because like I was telling you the story about the door-to-door thing. We basically had this rule where whoever sold the most got the front seat. I got that front seat, like all because I was so competitive with everybody with it. And like the boss that I had knew that I was so competitive with people, because sometimes we get dropped off alone, and he'd come by and he'd be like, oh, this person, they have like 3 more than you, and I would get so angry. And so it would motivate, and dude, I would come back and I would just have demolished everybody, and they were like, what are you talking about? Like, we didn't sell anything today. I was like, James told me that you guys had like all of this stuff, and he's just motivating me.
Well, that's a good...
So I was so competitive.
That's a good boss right there.
Yeah, he knew how to mess with me.
But you brought up the most important point, and I want to, since this podcast is about soul wealth, I want to tie it back to the little nugget of gold you dropped there, is that it's not about having something to prove. Because if you have something to prove, you will always eventually be disappointed.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh, I need to prove to these people that I can get 1 million subscribers. You're going to get there and you're going to have another thing to prove. And you're going to have another thing, or you won't get there and you're going to not come through on one of your goals, or you're going to lose something, or you're going to not be as successful as someone. And if you put your worth in proving, making a point, you will always eventually be disappointed.
Yeah. And when you do, I feel like when you do achieve it, it just falls so flat because you're like, that was supposed to fill this gap that I have, and it didn't. Like, oh shit, like now I'm existentially had no clue, like purpose or what I'm doing.
Dude, there's so many people, it's like that. There's so many people that gain the world but lose their soul. That's a Bible quote, but it's like in the sense that you hit 1 million subscribers and you've put all your worth in your work and you hit your milestone, but your relationships you gave up on those.
And
that's what that's like literally what I'm making this podcast. To encourage people to invest.
I mean, and that's I think what happened to me for the longest time is that like I always did have those things to prove, and so like I had that first business, and then the second business I had was after college, and so like all my time went into that. You know, I was traveling for it. I was put all my money into it, all my time was in it, and so for like most of my 20s, all of that was sunk into this business that, like maybe would go somewhere, maybe would not. And so I think I just got to that breaking point where it was like, do I want the rest of my 20s, like very valuable youth, to be spent in, mainly Kansas and working on this business and like not having, relationships, not developing deeper friendships, like not traveling and seeing the world, not, enjoying all, just body function and like being able to go hike up a mountain without like being so sore and everything like that. Was all of that sacrifice going to be, worth, whatever potential that business could go on to be or not be? And I think that's when I kind of had shifted. But then there's like another like mindset. I think it's Joseph Campbell. I might be wrong on the name, but it's the guy who like popularized a lot of the national parks and everything. But basically he had like this some business, and he was pretty decently successful at it, and then it sold it and had a fairly modest sum of money, and then so I think he just ended up like pursuing arts after that, and, like writing and all of the national parks and everything. And then I think he was like competing with another oil tycoon at the time or something like that, and they asked him like, oh well, aren't you jealous that this other guy is like just making more and more money or whatever? And I think his quote is something like well, he's still chasing a dollar figure that he's not like happy with, or he'll never have as much money as he wants to, and I'm already content with the money that I have. And so he basically like he had a content life and was doing everything that he wanted to do. He's like, I'm happy with the money that I have. Like I'm already done. Like I can check it, even though it's not as much as him, but like he's never gonna have enough. He's never gonna have enough. I feel like I have enough and I'm content and I'm doing what I want to. Yeah, so that was interesting.
Because even if he had more money than that guy, they would have asked him about someone else. There's
always a bigger fish.
There's always someone better. J. Cole has a song called Love Yours. Okay. And it talks about like the whole point of the song Love Yours is that like as long as you think happiness is somewhere else, it will never be where you're at.
It's never in the moment. Yeah, and that's what happened to me a lot too, is like once I achieve this thing, I'll be happy. Once I have 100,000 subscribers, once I have $1 million, once I have whatever. And that's a big mindset shift that I have now, is instead of that where everything I had was future and sacrifice and all of that, I was like, okay, what would my perfect day look like? And I got this from one of Ryan's videos. I don't even think he remembers it because it was somebody else's like mindset. But like what, like realistically, if I had a perfect day, like what would all of that cost? And I like wrote a lot of those things down, and a lot of it was very simple things that were very cheap. And I was like, I can live this every single day. Yeah. And so that's what I've tried to do now, is like, I don't really have, people always ask me like, oh, what is your end goal? Or like, what do you want to get to? And I don't really have an end goal or a thing. It's like, I want my everyday process just to be enjoyable and to like it.
Well, that's really beautiful.
And so, yeah, with like the perfect day, it's like, so many things. It's like if I can do this every single day, like I can easily make enough money to do that. And so now I'm just happy on a lot of days, or content at the very least, because I'm getting to do all of those things. And I think for me, that's the mindset is like shifted from so goal oriented and finished things. Like even a lot of religions sometimes are like, oh, you live this life so that you can get this thing of like heaven, right? But then Alan Watts has this really nice metaphor that's like life is like music. It's not for the ending crescendo, or like when you go to a concert, it's not for the final chord. It's for the dancing and for the music and the feeling of everything, of all the stuff in between. So it's like live the life for the music that's being played and the journey of all of it and the process of things, and not so much for like that ending achievement or that, you know, I'll get all the answers at the end or whatever. It's like you kind of have to have the joy of all the stuff that's in between. And so I think that's,
I'm a Christian. It's an interesting concept because
so with that though, like what I guess the way that I've always viewed that, which this I think is more like, if you look at the older Bible and things like that, there's not a mention really of like a heaven or hell in it. Like if you talk to Jewish people, you can ask rabbis, because my friend's done this, and he's like, there's not a hell or like really a heaven. And so like, what is that? And it seemed like a lot of like the depictions of like hell or whatever came from Dante's Inferno a little bit, as far as like the fiery depths. But like for, I think, like the more pure Bible, heaven and hell kind of exist on earth. And I feel that I've felt that personally, because like there's times where it's felt like hell to me, or there's times where you know, I have got to live my perfect day and the things that I do, and it feels like heaven on earth sometimes. And it's like, why would I think that there's something else farther that is better than like what could be right now when I haven't experienced that? And so it does kind of tie into like that the religion is what the rabbi says is when you're away from God is when you're like more in hell.
That's really interesting.
And so that's, I don't know. It's just like a concept, you know, like I don't know like what is right or what is wrong, but it's always like fun to think about some of those things.
I do believe in heaven and hell, like afterlife, but that goes back to like, it's a faith thing.
Yeah.
If you knew it was for sure, then it wouldn't, then there would be no faith. But that's an iffy topic, and I wanted to get back to because you were talking about how you had this business, and your business ended up going on Shark Tank. How did you get on Shark Tank, and then why did you quit your business?
And
what was your business?
The business was Pinole Blues. So my friend was from Chihuahua, Mexico in college, and so he had this idea of importing organic corns, like blue corn, green corn, pink corn, and making authentic Hispanic products out of that, and like doing it the most authentic way. Like we stone ground the tortillas, because nobody was really doing that here, just making it off of the pure ingredients. And then he was donating a portion of those proceeds to the Tarahumara tribe that were there. It's the tribe that runs either barefoot or with the sandals made out of tires. They run like 50 to 100 miles a day. They're studied all over the world because their athletic abilities are just absolutely insane. And part of it is like the running with the barefoot, but part of it's diet too. And so there is a great story there to be told. And then just with a lot of these products have so much nostalgia and strong family ties with them, and food in general is just such a powerful thing. And so that's kind of where we started with it. And one of the dreams, at least for me, I'd always watched Shark Tank growing up as a kid, was, you know, to get on that platform. It's like the biggest platform you can get on as an entrepreneur. Less than 1,000 teams, or I think around 1,000 teams now have been on it. So it's very hard to get in. The statistic is harder to get in there than it is Harvard Business School. So to get on it.
What does the process look like to get on there?
You just submit an application, which, you know, there's, you know, over 50,000 applicants or more every year. And then they go through that list. You can go to open calls. And so we had done that for a couple years and kind of got a little close to it, but then the pandemic happened, and, you know, we had never really heard anything. But we started over the pandemic. We ended up losing like all of the momentum that we had, all the stores that we were in, because that had closed down. So at that time I was kind of like, well, this actually is a really good opportunity for us, because while we did lose all that momentum, this completely changes the status quo, and we have a whole new set of problems, and whoever can come up with solutions for those problems is going to win. And so that's like when TikTok was starting, and there really was no businesses on it at the time. I think like Chipotle and maybe Wendy's, you know, because they were always notorious for the social media stuff. So I was like, we need to get on. This is a new platform that, you know, has a potential to go crazy. So we started making videos, just vlogs about, college kids making a business and learning how to make all the traditional foods. And the TikTok exploded and did really well. We got 380,000 followers on it. We had a lot of viral videos, and TikTok even had us speak at a couple events because we were some of the first to utilize that platform for business and telling stories. And so Shark Tank saw that and had interest in it because it was me, my friend, and then our professor from school. And so it was just a very interesting group, this Hispanic guy, this white kid, and then this, little Asian professor. Like, what a team. Like, how are you guys a team? Yeah. And so it was an interesting dynamic. And
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think they chose you to go on Shark Tank because of your business or because of your story?
Oh, because of the story.
Yeah.
It's a reality show.
Yeah, so do you think they probably pick some people intentionally because they know their businesses suck and it's like going to be a moment on TV?
Yeah, I think so.
But Noel, describe to me now, since we know how you got there, what was it like to pitch to billionaires?
To the Shark Tank? I mean, because I've watched it since I was a kid, it was an overwhelming moment that, like...
Was that like
probably being over prepared and like it's real, the doors open, it's the first time you see him and you go in and you do the pitch, so but then you've got what you don't see is the cameras that are there and you see all of them. So to me it was a bit overwhelming, and I do feel like I didn't perform as well because like my mind's like I'm trying to do the pitch, but then I'm also like trying to grasp and the Shark Tank like studio
dreams,
and so it was just a little bit too much. And then now that I can share it, then I was this last season I was on or participated in MasterChef, and I liked that filming a lot better because it was over a period of time, and it wasn't just like, okay, you're going in and you're doing the pitch and then you're out. Like this one, like you walk in, like they talk to you, it's over days, and they people are there cooking, you're watching other people, so you kind of get a little bit of a feel for things, and so you kind of get eased into it a little bit more, and I felt more confident with that just because it's like I had my bearings with me, like I got used to the set. With Shark Tank, like, I mean, you just get thrown into the thing. So it's just a little much.
Where does Shark Tank, because you've traveled the world, you've been to South America, Europe, all over the States, you've seen glaciers, you've seen volcanoes. Where does walking in the Shark Tank rank on your surreal moments?
It's probably up there as one of the top because you're ending that barrier of like watching something on a screen or a TV and then like actually going in and doing it. And then, it's just like such a huge goal thing to do. It's like, I mean, like I said, like for entrepreneurs, that's where you want to be and go. And like there was just such a big deal for people to have done that show before. And most people, whether or not you have success and you get an investment, people generally go on to do pretty good things after it. I mean, Ring was passed up by them, and and then look at that company now. So I mean, people go on there, and whether or not they're taken, So
did you get an investment?
We did not. Which that was soul crushing at the time because it was like such a childhood dream to go on there and to do that, and it just was a dream that kind of became a nightmare, to be honest, because it like did not go how we wanted it all. We were really struggling with money and finances at the time, and like I had sunk so many years into it, and it just seemed like it kind of wasn't for a whole lot at that time. And so I think that was just kind of rough, and I think it was just like the nail on the coffin for me of like I was just trying to give it my all, and it just like wasn't quite fitting for what I wanted to do, or like being most authentically myself, or just the things that I think made me the most happy. Like I found it with like the videos and the food and doing those things, but having employees and having an overhead cost and all of these, being bound by not having as much creative freedom and like it being a business, there's just a lot of things that held a lot of restrictions on it that, weren't as great.
How did you end up quitting that and then going to like deciding I'm going to live in my car?
So shortly after that, I think my business partners, like, they knew I did not want to be in, we had talked about moving the business before because I didn't want to be in Kansas, and I just had a lot taken out of me with that whole experience. And so they basically were like, here's a really small check, you don't have any, if you want to take it, there's no more obligations to the business, no debt, no anything like that, because employees and all the machinery costs a lot of money, and we had to get investments and everything.
Yeah.
So it's like, here's a really small check. Where
Was your business profitable?
it was profitable it was profitable, but like minimally profitable.
Okay.
That one was just because, like I said, it takes years for that to happen, because tortilla machines, $50,000, 10 employees is X amount of money.
Yeah.
And then you're working on you're getting some money in, but then you have to take it out for the ingredient cost. So
Does the company still exist?
Yeah. And I think they're doing, and then they aired on Shark Tank, so that did really well, and they've continued to grow after.
That's good.
So it still exists, it still does well. But yeah, for me it was just kind of that exit, highway exit, I guess, of being like, here's this option. If you want to take it, you don't seem to be very happy in this role that you're doing, and we want you to be happy, and we want you to go and do those things. And so they're kind of like, we don't want to see you in Wichita, like take this little thing that's not really worth what you did, but get started and do something else. And that was really hard, because it felt like a failure, and like having to start over something completely again. But it's like, well, do I want to continue doing this for the years to come or whatever? And I remember seeing Aiden's video years before that, and he was just living out of a car. I remember the first video they had with it. He's like, I sold everything and I'm living out of my car. And then I just saw him going on these adventures with strangers. And I was like, if I ever have like the time one day to do that, where I don't have obligations, I want to do something like that. And so,
I'm adding a light.
Yeah. And
sorry.
That's, I don't know. Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
But yeah, I saw that, and I just remember being like, that's, really cheap. I have a car. I can do that. And so basically I got that check 2 weeks later. I ended the lease on the apartment that I had, and I moved everything out. I basically sold everything that I had, and then put some of my, like the few leftover kitchen gadgets that I had at my parents', and then I went to Iceland pretty soon after that, and then started my road trip. And then I ended up meeting Aiden, who like I got a little bit of the idea from, and then ended up like traveling with him for 3 months. So, and that was another thing, like I had watched his videos for so many years, and then now I'm friends with the dude and like in his videos. Like, what the fuck?
How did you meet him?
We became mutuals on TikTok, and then he ended up at Creator Camp, and so we had talked a little bit. He's really crappy at texting, which I'll admit. So we never really got to so we never really got to talk a whole lot on like Instagram or anything like that, but we knew of each other. And then we talked in Creator Camp a bit, and then we got to talk a little bit more deeply in Vegas, and then we just had a similar lifestyle, and he's really into like philosophical stuff as well, and so we just got along really well, and then just kind of ended up traveling together.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's really cool to hear your story. Now that we've covered how much you've traveled, I want to ask you, what were the best experiences / interactions? I want to know, what was the best dinner you ever had with someone? And then what was just the best social interaction? I know it's probably hard to
remember, I guess the best, like if we're gonna say like tasting food wise, was I had a birthday in New York City, and then I ended up going to this one restaurant. So I got introduced to one of our friends that is he's 27 and he's an executive chef at a Michelin star restaurant.
Yeah.
And so he like basically made like the entire menu for us, and sat down and talked with us about everything. And that was probably like the best tasting meal that I've had, was Michelin star, like Indian food. Very, very well, like just the nuance behind everything was like absolutely insane. Like everything behind that meal tasting wise was really good. I'm trying to think for like social interaction, like what
it's probably hard to pick like a favorite one, but what are some good ones? And not Creator Camp, because we'll talk about that later.
I was gonna say that one's up there just because so surreal with it. But I mean, MasterChef was also really good because it was like another Creator Camp, but just with food people. It was like all of a sudden you're surrounded by 80 people who are all super passionate about food, all have crazy stories, and it's just this mix of people you would never expect to be together, who are 18 years old to 50 years old, and who are from every ethnic background and socioeconomic background that you can actually think of.
This is the part of property here.
Yeah.
Mark is not above it, so we're going in the park, so park not work.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Park is closed. Guys, shout out to freaking Kyle Goesoff, because this is like our 4th location change and 2nd podcast attempt, and he's just been so cool throughout it. So I appreciate that a lot. I wanted to ask you, we'll just skip over the whole experience because that is a lot. I know that people are curious about this. You aren't paying rent because you live out of your car, but gas is the most expensive it's ever been. You still buy food everywhere.
Yeah.
How do you fund your travels?
So at first it was just the savings that I had, but now it's I'm able to do social media full time just through like brand deals and through the money that you get from like ad sharing revenue. But I mean, a lot of it is just keeping the cost as low as you can. Honestly, I think I'm pretty sure that I'm spending less money now traveling full time than I did when I was paying rent in Wichita, Kansas. And Wichita, Kansas is like the cheapest that rent is.
Yeah. So what would you say you spend on average a month traveling?
I mean, probably like $1,500.
$1,500?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
How much is rent in Wichita, Kansas?
Well, I mean,
were you in
that's rent, like for me and my roommate, we were in like a luxury place.
Yeah.
And it was like $600 a month.
Yeah.
So super cheap. But that's like, but then, if you go out and you do things or whatever, you have other bills and like car stuff and all that stuff. Like I was still probably paying, I don't know, I pay probably about the same as what I did in Wichita, Kansas, but I get to travel
see the whole world,
and
it's not
eat out more and like do all those things. Exactly. So I think the trade-off is good. Like I know that I wouldn't be any happier if I was going to bed in an apartment in Wichita than I am like in a car, like at a new place, or like after having gone on like some crazy adventure, if that makes sense.
So I gotta ask you, what a lot of people tell themselves, I'm gonna save my money and travel later.
Yeah.
And then they get into a 9-to-5 job and they take one vacation a year and they're like, we're gonna do that vacation in 10 years. What has traveling young taught you? Or what has traveling taught you?
So many things. I mean, I could write a whole book on everything that travel has taught me. But I mean, I think a lot of it's just like a freedom thing, and just making your cost of, like, if you're able to be uncomfortable, you can do so much.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a big thing, is like learning to be uncomfortable. And then a big thing that I think travel has taught me probably is just spontaneity and not having to make plans and to give up control.
Yeah.
Because I think that was always a really hard part for me, was like I was always a very, very big planner, and like, had to have control over a lot of situations. And giving up control is just always extremely difficult for me. But with traveling, I almost never have plans anywhere. And like the universe has just caught me in so many ways where I've just, things just tend to flow and happen randomly so many times. Like, I mean, I was telling you kind of the lore behind like Creator Camp. Like, I've just ended up meeting all of these people just kind of randomly. And even so last time when I was in Sedona, a couple content creators that I follow, they do the van life stuff too. I've tried to meet up with them for a little while, but like our schedules have never aligned. And I was there, and one of the guys pulled up right behind us.
Yeah. Wow.
I just had so many situations like that. Or when I went into or talked to the guy who's making the food in the van, he's like, I just watched your video that my friend sent to me.
Do you believe in divine intervention?
I think there's something that, like, I always have a lot of synchronicities, is what people call them, like where things just tend to be like almost unexplainable. And I feel like I've had a lot of that stuff happen. So I don't know what to call it. But it seems to be like there's something there.
Like, you don't think it's just, statistically, it's impossible.
It seems like it to me. Yeah.
You brought up a good point that I wanted to touch on, which was, sorry, this blasting music is distracting me, but I'm about to ask you my outro question in a couple seconds here. Like, I think the kind of dream for everyone is time, location, freedom. It means that you don't have... So let me give you an example. A professional football player might make millions and millions of dollars, and they can go to the hottest club, they can do whatever they want, but they still have to show up to practice every day, and they got to show up on game day Sunday. And in a way, that person who has millions of dollars and is the star of their team, in a way, they're not as free as you because they don't have time, location, freedom.
Yeah.
They have to be at a location at a certain time, and you can be wherever you want, whenever you want. And it's interesting when you think about it.
Yeah, for me, like, the autonomy and the freedom like that was always the biggest thing, probably one of the biggest valuable things to me. And I've experienced that before. Like, when I was in New York, I remember there was people who were making my age, making $250,000 or more, but from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. they're in the office and they go to bed super early. And then I remember they were joking. They were like, "Oh, well, we're gonna do this for the next 30 years of our life," or whatever. And I just couldn't imagine doing
but
that.
you're actually gonna do it for the
And then that to me is just absolutely absurd, because it's like, no matter how much money you make, somebody is like still in charge of your time. You have to ask permission to like go to the bathroom. Like, I can't do that. There's just something inside me that's not. But even along with that too, I don't know, I've just had so many experiences where life is so short and can be taken away. The drop of anything, and to invest all of that for a future time that's not promised is just really a whole concept for me.
I 100% agree. It's like this idea that you can... Bro, everyone says, like, today's not promised or tomorrow's not promised, but then they live like let me have my vacation in the future and my money in the future and all this stuff in the future. And it's like, there's two things with that. The one thing is that the really tragic thing is that you could die and you could save all this money, it would be useless. But the other thing about it too is that there's a difference between experience something at one age and at another age. And for sure, traveling young, I feel like, is like, it's, even if you travel again older, it's a whole different like thing. And it's like, if you don't do it, then you're missing out on that type of experience.
Yeah, and another thing with the travel too is just like, I talked with Tanner a little bit about this too, is a lot of people think of like coming of age as like high school years and stuff like that, but like scientifically your brain develops as much or more like in the time that you have your early mid-20s, like up until you're like 30. That like whole decade, honestly, to me, now that I've like kind of seen a majority of that decade, people that I've seen from high school until now changed way more in their 20s than they ever did in high school. And so your real coming of age, I feel like, is in your 20s. And so to be able to travel and do that, when you have the freedoms that, you have as an adult, 'cause it's like, I don't know, I felt like I really rushed to become an adult. Because I missed out on a lot of youth things, and then once you become an adult, and then especially once you start like working or whatever, it's like, as an adult you think you're gonna have all of this freedom and all of these things, and then it's like, man, I don't have all the things that I thought I was going to in adulthood. And so I feel like I have those things now.
Do you think the coming of age, I've never had someone point that out, but now that you say it, I agree with it. And do you think that part of that is due to the fact that in high school, although you have your own experience, it's the path that someone decides for you. It's like you were going to high school and you were going to college, and this is what everyone does. Whereas after college, or if you don't go to college, it's all up to you. Like it's completely your choice. So in a way, it's like it's your own vision on coming to age.
Yeah, you have to find find yourself. You have to, but I mean, that is what you have to do. And then a lot of times you do a journey like this where you go off to college or you do something, and so you're not around that echo chamber of like people telling you how to be something or do something. You like have to figure out who you are for yourself.
I feel like a lot of high school coming to age stories are not coming to age, but they're coming to like your perceptions of other people, where it's like, that's what's cool. So I want to emulate that. And then like a lot of past college, or I feel like the next level of the real coming of age is becoming your own person and figuring out what you like, not because like what other people like this.
Yeah. So, and then, yeah, like, I mean, like you said, you just have freedoms now. You have, it's just a whole nother set of rules for a game, really, in your 20s. So I've always felt like that is like more of your coming of age years is the 20s like that.
So this is what I like to end all my podcasts. Since this podcast is about soul wealth, I think the best way to soul wealth is to reverse engineer life, which is, what do you want people to say about you when you die? And they're not gonna say Kyle was the best car camper. They're not gonna say Kyle made the best Instagram videos. What do you want people to say about you when you die?
It's funny that you have that question. So I started another series that I haven't gotten a chance to edit it yet, but it is the concept around the kind of like the death that we were talking about, and some of it got inspired from Evie, who was at camp, because she had this thing, this video concept called I think it was a fake funeral or something like that. So instead of a birthday, she threw a fake funeral for her boyfriend, because she was, the whole concept is everybody waits to say all these things, or they're too afraid to say all these things until you die. And so, like, what would it be like if you had a funeral instead of, like, one of your birthdays? Like, if you did this on, like, your 25th and, like, your 50th, like, very rarely. But, like, for everybody to be able to say the things that, like, you wouldn't get to hear unless you were dead. And so that's a question that I've thought about.
Wait, is this video, it's online?
Evie's video is online.
Wait, say the title, because I want to go watch this.
I believe it's called a fake funeral or something like
by
that.
By Evie, what's her last?
By, let me look it up really quick.
I will slap a graphic of
slap the graphic.
Because that's such a
channel, but it's such a
cool concept,
brilliant idea, and so it kind of sparked me thinking about that, because I had a lot of death that was happening around me, and so I started a series that's last meals for me. So I'm learning how to make all of like my friends' last meals, like if they could choose to have a last meal, and then we have like an hour-long conversation about
that's such a good idea.
And so like while I'm making the food, it's just like us talking about
I gotta do that with you.
Those things. Yeah, it would be great. But I think like one of the biggest compliments that I've gotten that I've heard is just people are like, you're really good with conversations and like making people feel very comfortable, and like I can tell you anything and those types of things. And then so that's really important to me. And then I think just the films and stuff that I've seen in my life have inspired me to like be myself, or feel comfortable with who I am. And so I think that's like a big thing of like being an artist, that you want to express yourself and you want other people to resonate with that. So I think people resonating with that story somehow, being like, in the essence of saying, I was able to experience more freedom, or not care what others thought of me, or I took something from your story and like integrated it into my life, I think is the biggest thing that I learned.
It's a great answer.
Yeah.
I met you today, and I will say one of the things I would say about you if you died, I mean, hopefully that wouldn't happen, but
well, one day.
And I think this is such an awesome thing, and I think I failed at it today and you did really good at it, is that you're very present, like in the sense that you the only time you pulled out your phone was when I asked you about the video. You're not on your phone, you're very much here, super patient. As I moved the camera 5 times, you could have gotten upset, but just super patient and present, and I really appreciate that. All right, that's it.
So, thanks.
Thank you. Kyle Goesoff. In case this podcast becomes the biggest in the world one day, go find him on TikTok, Instagram, Kyle Goesoff. Anything else?
I think that's it, man.
All right. Peace out. Dude.